guys, System 5 here. You can call me Leo. Welcome to my studio. It's Saturday, so I've got my Atlanta United kit on. We're going to win tonight at home. We're going to write the season. It's been kind of a choppy start. Could be worse, but we spent a lot of money on offense, and we don't have a lot of goals to show for it. So today, I think we're gonna turn it around. I hope. So looking forward to the game later. But anyway, welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to talk to you about mixing break beats and straight beats. This is something I like to do to kind of mix things up, especially in a house set or a trance set where you have a lot of straight beat and then you want to kind of throw in a break beat to keep things interesting and then switch back to get back to the theme of the house or trance. So I've done this. There's a lot of examples in my previous sets. So like the one I seem to think about all the time and I really love is a track called Transform on the Branché set, which is a trance set. Transform is actually like a combination of jungle and trance, which is kind of cool. So you've got like a nice jungle drum and bass beat, and then it switches to straight beat basically on the end to mix in the next trance track. The track I'm going to use today as an example is called Invasion Alert. It's from my Bionic set, which was a house set that I just released earlier this year. And on its own, you can think of it almost like a big beat type of track. So, and I'm not making a direct comparison, but just think about like the Prodigy or kind of those UK, 90s and early noughts type of big beats like the Prodigy, Overseer, Fatboy Slim, that kind of thing, where some of this stuff you could actually put on the radio. It's got they've got cool beats, and the beats are really big, right? That's why it's called big beats. So they're you just remember the beats. It's not like just some hypnotic thing, right? So and a lot of those were break beats primarily. So Invasion Alert on its own kind of starts out. It starts out as a break beat, and it could on its own could be a big beat track. But it's part of a house set. So when it mixes into Invasion Alert, it's actually coming off a straight beat track. So it's kind of going back and forth. So when you think of drums in electronic dance music, EDM, unlike in say jazz or rock, where you can have drum solos, which jazz obviously is very much a solo type of genre where you basically have ensemble and then you basically switch into different solos and improvisation, and drums is one of the instruments that does that. With EDM, it's really more about the drums. Just kind of they provide the rhythm. They're generally strictly a rhythm instrument. But even within that, when I think of house music and when I think of straight beats, I think of just, hypnotic sort of consistent droning of beats that kind of underpin everything. And when I think of breakbeat and just back on the straight beat thing, and then they don't particularly stand out to your ear. They're there. You feel them, right? It's more of a feel. With break beats, they stand out because they're much more interesting. They're doing things like hitting beats in between the ones and so forth. And if you think about straight beats, like the most fundamental straight beat is a metronome click, right? It's just there to like establish a rhythm. You can do a lot of interesting things. You can have percussions, you can have variations, you can have all kinds of stuff with straight beats to make it much more interesting. And obviously the bass of the kick drum is much more interesting than a metronome, but it's effectively a metronome, musically speaking, at least the way I think about it. Whereas break beats are actually like, it's music. It's like stuff is going on and people are listening to it, and it's kind of your ear is drawn to it because it's just so interesting. So what I want to show here is kind of like how just some rules that I follow, and it's not, it kind of varies by track, but like what I did with Invasion Alert, which I think works really well, is how do you actually transition between break beats and straight beats? So if we listen to the last few bars, and what I did with Invasion Alert to go into the first transition, into the straight beat transition, is I actually, because you're changing the mood, right? You're going from like a crazy sort of beat to like a hypnotic beat, right? So if you think about kind of just life in general, right? It doesn't really make sense to get out of the car or something, where you've just been all wound up and immediately like start meditating, right? Which is kind of what, like, if you think about the craziness of a straight beat, a break beat, and then like the droning of a straight beat would be. So you probably want a little bit in between, maybe, go to the bathroom, get a drink, whatever, before you start meditating, right? So, I mean, it's kind of a weird example, but that's what came to mind. So, and I do it here with basically just kind of blowing up finalizing the build with the break beat, and then switching into a break with no beat, and then introducing like a hypnotic straight beat into it. So if you listen here, the last few bars. So there's a very kind of marked transition here, right? So you went from like a very busy build to like a very chill, relatively speaking, break, and then the beat came in. So you're, the listener was not just like shocked into like a different kind of beat, right? So that it kind of went through a progression, which I like. So, but the main thing I want to point out, the big difference besides actually cutting the drums, is how the bass actually changes. Because if I isolate the bass here, so this is the bass that underpins the breakbeat, and you can hear how it kind of hits. It hits on the breaks, right? Like on the different beats, and now it switches to just more of a metronome type of bass line, right? So you can imagine that you can very easily stick a straight beat on it. So I guess the first thing that I do is I always change the bass line so that you don't have a bass line like with a break beat. I kind of like my bass lines to reinforce the beats themselves. So like when you hit the kick drum, I like to have like an actual hit of a bass line, of a bass element at the same time, or just coordinate it with that, so that it kind of amplifies that bass. With the straight beat, you kind of do the bass. You can still do that, but I like to do the bass more in between the actual kicks, just to keep like whole time, right? And that's really common with like it's the K B B B. When you look at four in quarter notes, right? So you have a kick, beat, 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 kick, beat, beat, beat. That's really common in especially trance music, right? But house, like maybe the notes are a little bit longer, but still tend to be in between. So that's kind of the first thing. The next thing is that, obviously, just generally speaking, before I actually went into the straight beat, everything got simplified, right? So when you listen to how busy this track is, like right before the break, you've got melody, you've got basically all this it's mostly bass, a little bit of synths, kind of putting in there, and a lot of effects, like that last sample. thing about getting into a breakbeat from a straight beat is that you can go. Okay, back to the break. Less of that drop is a little bit easier to do because you can ultimately just kind of break it up. But what I did do, which you'll see right here, actually, so there's a snare roll, but because again, I don't like to work straight. I like literally tell the brain so that's basically it. I think the main lessons are and I follow. The main rules are first, build in some kind of transition, and I always, to go from break to straight, it's a lengthier transition, because again, you're asking someone to, like, it's almost like asking a runner to like stop without cooling down, right? um, when they're running. So typically, when you run, like, you run a 5K or whatever, you want to walk a little bit before you just stop and sit down, just to let your body cool down, and all the physical things that happen, right? So I think about it that way, where like the straight beat is just way busier. It's more like, it's more action, and then before I get into the straight beat, I like to kind of cool things down a bit, right? Before I get it back into, like, a rhythm. So that's number one. Number two is to make sure the bass transitions, even as part of that cool down, just to kind of get the brain and the listener ready for a more monotonous type of beat. Bass lines that are too busy really don't work, in my opinion, and my style, I guess, don't work well with straight beats. So I would say simplify the bass line. And then rule number three would be to, even when you start building back up and you introduce the new beat and everything, the straight beat part at least, don't go all crazy with layers. Just bring them in slow, or much. You can get away with a straight beat. You can, because it's so hypnotic, in my opinion, you can get away with much less stuff, much less layering. It's really more about the rhythm right at that point, which is kind of like, it's kind of counterintuitive, because you think that the breakbeat is just so crazy that it kind of draws the ear. It does, but it also affords you the ability to just make everything else crazy as well. With a straight beat, it just gets a little busy if, like, a bunch of stuff is going on, like, at the same time. And then on the way out of the straight beat to the break beat, that's more of like, it's more of like, more of a classic sort of drop, let's say, right? So you can build up and then, like, have some kind of riser and then drop right into it, or very close to that. I like to leave a gap in the actual kicks, again, just to give that little signal that says, hey, rhythm is changing. But what you can also do, like in this case, what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the full chorus back, right? Like right when I come out of the straight beat. So anyway, that's one example. I love this track a lot. I like it kind of on its own, as well as part of the set that it was in. I think it worked really well. I also like Transform and the Branche set, for a lot of the same reasons. It's a very different set. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. It's just kind of some insight into my thinking. Everybody's style is different. I hope that if you find some useful tips here, you can work them into your own style, or if you're just curious and you wanted to know how I'm thinking about this stuff, I hope it was insightful. Anyway, please like and subscribe, and I'll keep making these videos to kind of tell you what I'm thinking. So thanks, until next time, and then go Stripes.